Is Chuck Hagel, as Secretary of Defense, the radical reformer that those on the right feared and many on the left hoped for, or has he already been co-opted by pressures and norms of the defense establishment that he promised today to take on? Joining me at the table is Mattie Duppler of the National Priorities Project, a tax policy research group, Spencer Ackerman, senior reporter for Wired's national security blog, The Danger Room, and Mattie Duppler, policy director at Americans for Tax Reform. I feel like being the head of the Pentagon is like being the Pope. It's like when there's a vacancy, it's like, well, this next one's going to really have to deal with reforming the institution. They need reform inside the Curium, and there's a lot of rot in there, and then you go in, and guess what? You get co-opted by the institution. What is your feeling about where Chuck Hagel will fit into that trajectory?
So there's a joke among defense reporters that in order to be
my favorite genre of joke,
naturally, outside of papacy jokes about Pentagon, there's a joke among defense reporters that in order to be defense secretary, you have to give the speech that Hagel gave. That you come in, you're going to make sure acquisitions are going to get cleaned up, personnel policies are going to be aligned with what's actually in the national interest, costs are going to come under control. You also can't get out of the Pentagon before you renege on all of that, and the building has ground you down into a fine powder. In terms of everything Hagel said today, there's a lot for reformers to get excited about. Implementation is what this is all about.
Since you teed this up, I want to play this incredible bit of sound that one of our second producers found, which is a speech that has been lost to history, but was given by Donald Rumsfeld on September 10th, 2001, vowing, in much sharper terms, vowing to take on the Pentagon establishment. Take a listen.
Let's make no mistake. The modernization of the Department of Defense is a matter of some urgency. In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death, ultimately, every American. A new idea ignored may be the next threat overlooked. A person employed in a redundant task is one who could be countering terrorism or nuclear proliferation. Every dollar squandered on waste is one denied to the warfighter. That's why we're here today, challenging us all to wage an all-out campaign to shift Pentagon's resources from bureaucracy to the battlefield, from tail to the tooth. Some might ask, how in the world could the Secretary of Defense attack the Pentagon in front of its people? To them I reply, I have no desire to attack the Pentagon. I want to liberate it. We need to save it from itself.
Now, I'm now confused in how to throw to you, Mattie, because what I want to say is, well, Hagel didn't sound Rumsfeldian, but then is that a good or bad thing, that he did not sound Rumsfeldian?
Oh, hard to tell, hard to tell. You know, this year, in the so-called austerity climate, we're going to spend $630 billion on defense. And here's the thing. They can't even tell us where all that money's going because the Pentagon can't pass an audit. Those are big numbers. Hagel put out some big stuff today. There's a lot to be excited about. He said, we can't just tweak. Now the question is, we've heard that before. Are we now just going to see tweaks, or are we going to see the real change that he just gestured at?
The reason I wanted to have you here, Mattie, was because you've been on Up before, and you're with Grover Norquist Group, Americans for Tax Reform, but I think it's fair to say skeptical about the size of the defense budget. And I was sort of amazed, I have to say. You guys won a victory, which was, I thought Republicans were going to blanch at the sequester. And the reason they're going to blanch the sequester, in fact, the design of the sequester was to put something in to make them blanch, which was the fact that of the $85 billion in cuts in this first year, half of them are on the defense side, which is, it's a big budget, but that's still a chunk, right? That's going to take a bite. And somehow Republicans got themselves to being okay with it. So the question is that going to endure, and will that create political space for Chuck Hagel to do something more than tweaking?
Right. Well, this is what we talked about last time I was on, that sequester was supposed to be this sort of Damocles, and it was, I think we called it a Nerf ball. You know, it was one of those things where Republicans didn't blink, and I think it does make it a lot easier to do some of the things that I think all of us sitting at this table hope for, the kind of reform that we talk about all the time, because now Republicans can't be that impediment to the left or the right that they were before, because look, they've done it once before. What's to say now the second time that this is different? You can't say that, no, I could never touch defense spending, which of course is supposed to be a sacred cow for the right, if you've already done it.
Does that stand to you?
There's a line in the speech that risks getting overlooked, in which he actually gives Republican defense hawks an out, in which he says, if you want us to not have these cuts be so drastic, be so dramatic, maybe put everything on the table, to go a little slower about this or not cut as deeper, give us some kind of certainty in terms of what our budgets are going to be going forward. Translated from the politician, it means you have to raise taxes.
That's interesting. And one of the things,
I don't know where that goes.
One of the things I think that's interesting is we now have there's, you know, on my monitor today, it was that the Hagel speech was here and North Korea news stacking up on the other screen. And of course, there's a connection between the North Korea news and how hard it is to cut the Pentagon budget, right? Because when the North Korea stuff is in the news, all of a sudden we're sending a missile defense system to Guam, right? Because when security is on the line, the money gets spent. I want to talk about that and talk about the nexus between those two and what to make of what's going on in North Korea and South Korea right after this.